agitation for multi-party democracy when you were a younger journalist. And from your perspective, even as we give you a moment to share your sentiments following the passing on of Raila Odinga, try and paint for us a picture of Raila Odinga back in the day.
So I got to know Raila Odinga way back, I think, when I was a young journalist in 1990s, working for a magazine called Society magazine, which was at the forefront of a push for multi-party democracy. That was before 1992. And Raila was one of our biggest, we did a number of headlines on him. Raila, his father, Jaramogi. And from even earlier than that, that is actually immediately after he was released from detention. Because I remember my first encounter was when he was released from detention. We went to his house in Kileleshwa. At that time, he was staying in Kileleshwa. And even after being released from detention by President Moi, he was still he has always maintained a very vibrant pro-democracy voice throughout his life. Although over the last few years, he has changed into a different person, but that is debatable as to whether he's pushing for democracy or what agenda he was pushing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Many younger Kenyans, especially the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha, even many millennials may not have really interacted with the younger Raila Odinga, probably just getting to read of him in the age of social media and probably in the agitation for change of constitution. And he also is said to have contributed a lot in the 90s and in the transition from a one-party state to multi-party democracy. How much of that do you think many Kenyans would get to appreciate?
I would say that just that force of character that he had, and I remember way back in the among the people he used to be with, you would have James Orengo, Kiraito Murungi, Paul Muite, and the likes of Malim, like Lagdara, former deputy speaker, Farah Malim. So those were the people. Those were the people he was around, and among all of them, at that time they were called young thugs. Among all of them, he was what you'd call prima primaris. He was the first among equals. Much as his father was still there, because his father died much a bit in '93, I think, if I'm not wrong. So at that time, he was still. He was also. I would say he was a man in a hurry. No, at that time, because I remember even incidents where, for some time, his father used to get along better with James Orengo, with the Wamalwa, Kijana Wamalwa, with Professor Anyang' Nyong'o. The reason being, they were more moderate. Raila was a man in a hurry. He wanted the things to happen there and then. So that fire, I think, stopped at some point, but he has never lost the charisma. What I would say, the most distinct part about him is that he was a person who would command respect. Somehow, there's what you'd call an aura of that you don't get with many people. He walks in somewhere, and people listen to him.
And with your background in media and communication, he's a man who spoke through metaphors. He was a bit witty, isn't it, in how he communicated and related with the audiences in his political rallies?
Yeah, but as I know, one thing that people, because I interacted with him both officially and unofficially, because at that time, the paper I was working for, I was a managing editor, news editor of that weekly, Firebrand Weekly newspaper that was actually the only newspaper that could write negative stories about Moi. And we could trend in places where nobody else dared to do. We interacted with him, both officially as a journalist and also socially. So, there are two different persons, you would say. Raila Odinga in public is a very ebullient, outgoing person. But in private, he's actually shy. You'd find him, you'll not almost look at you straight in the eye. You just talk very little in private, but when he gets to a podium, he changes into a different, you'd change into a different. And that has always been the case, because somebody we would sit up with in different places, social places, and you find him very different.
And that's interesting, because even in your own sentiments, you stated that you are not really sure if he was the same character you knew back then. Do you get the feeling that probably, despite the fact that he has been in our politics for such a long time, close to 40 years, that many Kenyans still did not understand Raila Odinga, the man?
I would say so. I would say so. Possibly even us in the media, because you'd find, you can actually say who, the impact is under on Kenya's politics. Look at, there's a person who started his career as a rebel politician, so to speak, from the time he was detained he was detained. He has always been on the, from the time he was detained. After his detention, you'd find he starts off as an opposition. He ends up in government way back, and you can trace he has been in government one way or the other from around 1997. Yeah, he has always been in government. Yet he maintains his credentials as an opposition. So I think enigma is the right one to use for about him.
Beshak, some will view his legacy politically as a conflicting portrait. A man on one hand who fought for what is right and a constitution, and a man who in 2007 refused to accept defeat that led to a bloody 2007-2008 post-election violence. That part of